Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how we define the middle class, and is it the middle class that's behind, or primarily as a class, behind the push for globalization. Now, I guess a couple of things we need to define here. One is defining the middle class, the other is defining globalization, but dealing with both of those issues. There are various people, for example, the Simon in history, and he believes, or if I've understood him correctly, he believes the middle class are the ones that are pushing for and benefiting from globalization. I assume from that Simon perceives himself as working class and everyone else as middle class, perhaps. But just looking at that, so just looking at the middle class, then in Australia or Sydney, I guess, really to enter the middle class, which is a nice tree-lined street in a nice area with good schools where people are polite and pleasant to one another. There's no gangs and goons running around. There's even the drug dealers have better quality BMWs and wear nice suits and that sort of thing. So, and their supermarkets are nice. There are just no vulgar, brutish people around, or certainly if there are, they're very few in number. It's a nice place to live, I suppose. But the entry into that is, in Australian dollar terms, $2.5 million, or say in US dollars terms, 1.8, 1.9 million, that sort of thing. In British pounds terms, say 1.35 million pounds, 1.4 million pounds, around that. So that's the entry level into the middle class. Now, the middle class used to assume someone who had some sort of profession and ongoing employment, and could have some, so was making an above average income, of course, but I don't think middle class means that anymore. Certainly not since maybe the 1980s, 1990s. We've got to look at what used to be middle class. Say 75% of jobs were considered middle class or better in 1970, but by the 1990s that had fallen to 25%. And in Sydney, less than 1% of jobs pay enough money to deliver that lifestyle, that what we would hitherto have maybe referred to as middle class lifestyle. But in order to achieve a middle class lifestyle, that is a nice house in a nice area, in a nice street, and near good schools. There's fewer than 1 in 100 workers in Australia or are making that sort of money. So it's now, we've now got a middle class that really is working in the gig economy. They've got huge job insecurity. The programmers that were hitherto computer coders and programmers that were hitherto middle class are now losing their jobs to Indians who are being paid half or a quarter as much. Accountants that used to you would say was very much a middle class job, their jobs are now getting outsourced to places like India and the Philippines and so on. So really a middle class situation in Australia, or Sydney again at least, requires that you're in the top 1 in every 200, say 1 in every 170 workers or something, but certainly decently less than 1% of the workforce you'd say be middle class. Now, that doesn't include things like inheritance, or if, say, 2 higher income earning people get together. For example, there are 2 barristers I know, and they're both very well, lawyers, but top flight lawyers. They're both in the $600,000 to $800,000 a year category, and so their household income is after tax and everything about $800,000 a year. So you can imagine they live a lifestyle that reflects that sort of income. But really, rich means now inheriting enough money that you don't have to work, and you can have everything you want. You can live in a very nice area, waterfront. You've got your jetty, you've got your yacht. Maybe you're joint leasing a Learjet with a few other people, and you've got a $250,000 motor vehicle. Multiple $250,000 motor vehicles in the driveway. You can burn $50,000 on the cut of the cards, and you don't even feel the pain. Now those are the rich, people who are sort of in the rich and mega rich and so on. The Bill Gates mega rich. They're in that sort of category. But really, the middle class now has shrunk to I think. Even if you want to be very generous, say this is earning from their own income, by the way, very generous, maybe 5% of the population is now middle class. Now, if you want to, and we can say upper middle class, I suppose, but the upper middle class and the well-to-do, they're very much in favour of globalisation, or they don't see it as a problem. They just don't see how it's going to affect them negatively at all. So they're not opposing it or against it, and they're not suffering as a result of it, or certainly not immediately. They will in the decades to come, or their children certainly will, but today they don't see it as an issue. And just people that I know, they've got their $3.5, $4 million, $5 million house, and all that sort of stuff, and the things that go with it. And if any, Indians or Chinese or any of those sort of people do move into the area, they're the very wealthy anyway from those countries. They keep to themselves. They don't bother anyone else. They're private and quiet. They're well behaved, and so they're the rich Brahmins from India and the Chinese Communist Party corrupt goons from China who are buying up swathes of real estate in the West. Things that we in the West can't do if we go to India or China, by the way. But so they move in there, and they don't affect anybody. They don't really change anything. Comments may be made about how these people only have Chinese workers in around the house, Chinese gardeners, Chinese cleaners, Chinese whatever's coming to work on the place, Chinese handymen. So there's that, comments maybe get made about that in passing, but it's no big deal. So middle class, I think in the West and certainly in the bigger cities has declined to, as I say, around 5% or less of the people. Now again, that doesn't include inheritance. I know people have inherited a house for $3 million, and if you've got only sort of a small number of children, but a lot of relatives who all own houses, the children can make gazillions out of just inheritance. But in terms of income, if you're going to do it from your income and not from inheritance, then there are and it just shows, by the way, the middle class is shrinking, and if you do sort of reverse mathematics, it's shrinking exponentially. The number of people that can live a middle class lifestyle from their own income, not including inheritance or winning a lottery or something, but from their own income, that number shrunk to 2-3% less than that. So there's now pretty much everyone is relying quite heavily on inheritance if they want to maintain that upper middle class lifestyle. Now a lower middle class lifestyle is you're in the gig economy. If you own anything at all, it's a house in an ordinary suburb where you're going to have a block of apartments next to you, and the government's going to be sticking a lot of Afghani alleged refugees in there. You're going to have a lot of unpleasantness. You're going to, at the shops in your local shopping centre, you'll be lucky to find anyone who can speak English. When you go to the local medical centre, the doctors there will speak minimal English. So your lifestyle will be drastically changed. Your kids will be going to school with, as white people, there'll be minorities in the school and so on. So it's a drastic effect on your life, your lifestyle, and the expectations you have for your children and so on. And you're in the gig economy, you can be kicked out at any time without any benefits or severance or anything like that. Severance pay. So then you're scrambling madly to find another gig just to keep the payments on the mortgage up, or whatever. And if you want to go one step better and go to a better place, then you're under a huge amount of pressure. You probably couldn't, you can't afford kids as a couple. You would need two incomes, and you couldn't afford any kids. And without inheritance, you maybe just make it to the finishing line on buying a average price house in your lifetime. But anything better than that, it's just not on. Now, so middle class, in my view, the very definition of it has changed. In Victorian times, say the 1870s in England, the middle class was defined as someone who had regular employment. Working class was someone like you jobbing. You'd sort of work at the factory, and then the factory would lay you off if the ship doesn't come in with the raw materials, or if things were a bit slower and that sort of stuff. And then it was like casual employment. But middle class meant you pretty much had permanent employment in some sort of profession, and that was the differentiator. Your pay might not be that much higher. It was the continuity of the employment that meant you could access levels of credit, bank loans that the working class couldn't, because they didn't know when they were going to be unemployed. They could be unemployed tomorrow or the day after. They didn't know, and nor were they in control of it, nor did they have a situation where they could take control of it, although the trade unions later would alter that balance of power. So the meaning and definition of middle class has changed over the years, and I think it's changed again recently. Now, having a look at the upper middle class people, are they benefiting from globalization? In some ways, in some ways not. Again, if you're in a well-to-do area and very well-behaved Chinese and Indians move in and pay well above the card for the property, sort of no one's really complaining about that. And again, there are no gangs roaming around. It's not still a pleasant place to live. There are no houses being demolished to put up high-rise apartments, that sort of stuff. So it's still a nice sort of lifestyle to have, but fewer and fewer people can afford it. 5% or less can afford it in the big cities like Sydney. So, in terms of the benefits, I don't know. I was over at a buddy's place one day when we were sort of talking business, and one of the tradesmen, I guess you'd call it, came in to do some stuff, and the guy could barely speak a word of English. He arrived late. He ended up doing shoddy work and so on. So I don't know the guy. The guy was complaining. It's really hard to get. If you want to get reliable sort of tradespeople, you have to pay. You've got to get white people and pay them extra. If you want to get cheaper, then you have to accept substandard. But in terms of cleaners, for example, getting people to clean the house, lop branches off trees, that sort of thing, he was very much in favour of high immigration of peasants, because he could get cheap cleaners and cheap gardeners, that sort of stuff. So in that sense, he liked it. Otherwise, he kind of didn't care. He's not against it. And I find that's about the status with most. Now, if you're a property developer or someone in finance or something like that, then you're probably in favour of it. But there's only a tiny proportion of the population that are in those sort of jobs where they would directly favour it. Again, you wouldn't even be 1% or even half of 1% of the workforce would be in that sort of category. So really, the amount of people that support the globalization project, that is, the mass migration, sending jobs offshore to China, all this sort of thing, are the people who are really quite immune to the negative effects of it, and some of them may be in the middle class. People in government jobs, for example. The government employs nearly a third of the working population of Australia, and a lot of those people are in favour of, ideologically, not in practical terms, but ideologically in favour of, say, mass migration, but they're not in favour of other things. So it's kind of a mixed bag. If you say who supports globalisation, and all its manifestations, you'd be lucky to find 1% of the population, which is why the globalists have to tell so many lies through their control of the mainstream media and their control of all the politicians. I mean, if globalization was so good, they wouldn't need any lies. They could just say, here it is. This is how we're all going to benefit, and and get more and have a better standard of living and so on. But that's not how it is. The standard of living for white people in the West is plummeting, and globalization is the prime mover of that declining living standards. So if it was put to the vote about globalization, it would be absolutely trounced. Assuming it was, the truth was told, it would be trounced. But again, the endless stream of lies, from the mainstream media and the denouncing of anyone that questions globalization. Questioning globalization in the West is effectively a crime today. That's how bad it is. And if it was that fucking good, they wouldn't need to do that. So obviously it's not good, and they can only push the globalist project through by outrageous behaviour, central to which is suspending all our legal rights. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.